Today we're making fig wine.
Now, this is going to be a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of ingredients, but we're going to go through them one by one. First, we're using about 2 pounds of dried figs. Then we're also using half a pound of raisins. And you might be wondering, but why? Why are we using raisins and figs?
Well, raisins have a property that figs do not, and that's also a reason why we're going to be adding this as well.
That's a lemon, by the way, not an orange like I would normally say. That's a lemon.
Raisins are naturally acidic, while figs are not. And if you know about the flavor pyramid, you need to have a little bit of all three, being your base flavors, your acids, and your tannins. So the raisins and the lemon are there to bump the acid level up where the figs are lacking.
So what I have done so far is we have 2 pounds of the dried figs and the half pound of raisins sitting in here. That is hot water, like boiling water. Why would I do that? Well, sanitization. We want to make sure that there's no beasties or anything growing on them, no wild yeast or anything like that. So the temperature will kill them off. But right now, I am peeling this lemon. Now, what I want to do is just get the peel itself. I don't want any of the white pith. As you can see, I have it here. We are going to use the juice of this, though, so you want to save it for the moment. And I have here the peel. And I'm just going to drop that right in our water as well. Apparently, I'm going to splash it everywhere, too. And that's okay. You know, I make messes. That's what I do. Now, I'm putting that in there for the same reason. I want to sanitize it just a little bit in case there was anything on this lemon. Now, this water is not going to get thrown out. We're actually going to use that as part of our brewing liquid. So any sugars that leach out and things like that are still going to be in the brew. So that's why we want to use that. Now, I want to get my lemon going.
We're going to use Brian's favorite new thing. We just got this. I know, it's old school, right?
Hey, it works.
But he loves it.
It just works so well.
And it's just a hand-pressed juicer.
Yep, and I'm just squeezing it right in. But it keeps the seeds out. And see, it just works. You know, I do it with... We have the lime tree in the backyard. You know, those infamous limes. I actually like to drink lime water. What I do is I just take one of the limes, cut it in half, and squeeze it out into a glass of ice water. And it's awesome. What we do not want, though, is this. The pith and the outside. Don't need that.
The reason why we're avoiding the pith as much as possible is because pith is going to add some bitter flavors to your brew that we don't want.
Some people say it really doesn't do that, but I'm playing it safe in this case. There's no harm in not putting it in there, so I'm not going to worry about it. We're just not going to do it. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Trying to get every last bit of juice. See how much more juice was in there? That's crazy. You could never get that out trying to do this by hand. No way. I find I get almost double the amount of juice when I use the juicer as when I used to do this by hand. All right, I'm done with that part. Now, in case anyone was curious as to how I came up with this recipe, we looked around a lot, found quite a few different recipes for this. Most of them were fairly similar. Some of them had orange and lemon, some of them had raisins, some of them didn't have raisins, some of them just had lemon, all kinds of different things. Most of them had white sugar. Now, my opinion on white sugar has changed a little bit. I don't really want to use white sugar, and thinking about it, white sugar doesn't really add anything but alcohol, right? It doesn't add flavors. So we're going to use honey instead, because honey and figs go really nicely together. So I thought those flavor combinations worked really, really well. So I'm going to measure out 1 pound of honey. Now, this was sent to us by Derek Skinner. He sent us several bottles. This is just a basic wildflower honey. So it should work. Oh, it smells so good. It's just a nice neutral-ish honey, and it should work really well for this. Not all wildflower honey is neutral. This one happens to be. So I'm going to measure out 1 pound. That is 454 grams for our metric friends. All right, so we have our 1 pound of honey. Now let me go over a little bit of the math of this recipe. Essentially, we're going to be using 71B yeast, and that has like a 14 to 15% tolerance range. We know it goes higher than that, but I'm looking for something in the 11 to 12% range, so I know that I need like a 1.090 or so starting gravity. If you don't understand that, we have videos on calculating your ABV. It's just reverse engineering a little bit. So I know if I want that, but I also want to add plenty of the figs, and I know I had raisins, and I wanted to use honey. So how much of everything to use? And I know somebody's going to ask me, isn't this a mead? I'll get to that in just a second. But what I did is I did some calculations for you. So half pound of raisins has approximately 123 grams of sugar. By the way, that's 227 grams. It has 123 grams of sugar, which is about 0.27 pounds, which works out to 0.012 gravity added to this must. Okay, because sugar, plain old sugar, is 0.046 gravity per pound in a gallon of must. So this is going to be roughly a gallon when we're finished. That means about 12 points of gravity. Okay, 0.012. 1 pound of honey is 454 grams, and that gives me 0.035 gravity. I know there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm really sorry, but this is important. So we would add that 0.035 to the 0.012, and we're building up our original gravity. Then we have the dried figs. Now, the dried figs is 908 grams in total, 477 grams of sugar in that many figs. That's kind of shocking. That gives me 0.048 gravity. Okay? So this is what's important here. When we add the 48, the 35, and the 12 together, we get 1.095. So it's 1.095 gravity. Now, what's really interesting is for this to be a mead, I would need 50% of that number to come from the honey. Only 35 points of the 95 points are coming from honey. Therefore, this is a wine from a technical standpoint. Can you call this a mead if you want to? Sure. But don't tell me that this is mead because it's actually not, okay? But you can call it mead if you want to. To me, I like the idea of using various things, and you know what? They're all wine as far as I'm concerned. Some people are going to be really crazy about that and say, no, this is a mead, this is this. But you know what? In the end of the day, they're all still technically a wine, all right? So let's just go with that. But we have everything sanitized now, so I'm literally just going to dump all of this right in.
Very carefully.
Very, very carefully.
It's an overfilled jar of
hot liquid
and solids, which are probably going to splash everywhere.
Yeah, probably. I'm going to try to pour off as much as I can first. Okay, that did not go well.
Do you want a ladle?
I think we're going to ladle this. Almost had our first burn injury right on the show. So Derek just got us a ladle, and she sanitized it in
the red bucket of sanitization!
Just like everything else has been sanitized, except for the stuff that's in there, which has actually been sanitized in hot water. So I'm just going to ladle it in. It's going to take a while. This is the boring way.
So as you watch Brian laboriously do this, because we didn't think far enough in advance as to how we were actually going to get this into there.
Maybe you didn't. I knew it was going to be like this.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the significance of figs. Now, figs have played a crucial part in nearly every human society back from the beginning of recorded time. They have been documented in nearly every religious text, and they have been a prominent symbol not only for the divine and spiritual nature of things, but also for royalty and gifts among kings. It was said that Buddha reached enlightenment while resting underneath a fig tree.
Huh.
It's also been documented in the Bible for some of its medicinal properties. It is a symbol of strength because if you think about the strangler fig, it will nearly take over anything, whether it's another living tree or a structure, and wrap it and make it its own. So figs are super symbolic and can be found across the globe in various forms.
All right. It's all in there. We only lost a little bit of the liquid, so I'm not all that concerned.
It smells so good.
It really does. Okay, I'm also going to put our tea in here. Now, this is just a black tea, nothing fancy. This happens to be Irish breakfast tea. It also happens to be decaf because I don't do caffeine. And it's been sitting for probably 10 minutes, so it's a little over-extracted probably, but it's okay. The type of tea you use is not important, okay? It's not there for flavor. This is an important fact that a lot of people seem to misinterpret. The tea is there to add tannins. which is part of the trifecta of balance. The tannins are, well, basically, if you've ever had black tea with no cream, no sugar, no milk, no anything in it.
And you get that puckery, dry sensation in your
That's
mouth?
Tannins.
That's tannins.
The dry effect from a red wine, a dry red wine, that's tannins. Chardonnay also has tannins because it's been oaked. These are things that add to the flavor, add to the body and feel of a wine or mead. So to me, they're like super critical.
Now, winemakers traditionally use the seeds, the skins, even the stems of their grapes, of their grapes. Yes, they're bunches of grapes to extract the tannins in the wine. Now, we didn't know how much tannins was in the skin left over from the drying process of figs.
Probably
or
a decent amount,
the
but they're thin
drying
skins.
process of the raisins.
There's not a lot of tannins in raisins, shockingly enough.
Yeah, so we're erring on the side of caution and adding the tea because we know there's plenty of tannins in there, and that way we know we have a tannin baseline in our brew.
And we totally meant to put this into a brew bag.
Oh, we did.
And we
Oops.
forgot. So guess what? There's going to be a lot of goop and mush at the bottom of this.
So if you are planning on making this brew and haven't started and are actually watching this video first, which hopefully you are, use a brew bag. It'll be so much easier.
Trying to figure out if we can still do a brew bag. I think there's a way.
We can dump it.
Because I really want to use a brew bag.
Okay, let me get another one of these.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so in case you forget to get your brew bag out before you start assembling, it's really simple. We sanitize this in Turbos. We're using Star San, and we just lay it over the top like that. And now I'm going to pour this in. I am going to ask Derica to hold the bag, though. I'm going to need that again soon. Yeah, it's holdable now, temperature-wise. I'm just going to pour this carefully. Oh yeah, get all that good stuff in there. At least we'll know it's mixed well. I can rinse this out with the water too.
Yeah. I really can't see what I'm doing.
All right, so we got most of it out. Now I'll just add a little bit of water. Rinse off the sides. Every little bit counts, right? That'll do. All right, I'm done with this.
Are you done with this?
No. Okay, so I know some of you are thinking, but Bri, you put all that stuff in there that has sugars. That's not going to show up in your gravity reading. You're probably right. That's why I did the calculation. And this is best case scenario. I don't expect all those sugars to come out, but I also know that 1.090 was pretty much my high point for where I wanted this to go. So 1.095, I'm within 5 points. Adding in a little bit of margin of error for the fact that I don't think it's all going to extract, and I'm good. I did chop up the figs. I did not chop up the raisins. I generally don't. And now I'm just putting in some water up to probably right up about there. There's a reason why I put so much water in, because watch, when I pull this out, if I can get it even sort of out, look at how much it takes up. See that? So I want to still get close to a gallon, which I know is somewhere in this range. There's a lot of liquid in there still. So by putting this back in like that, that's a decent amount of headspace. I think it's a lot of headspace, actually.
Yeah, but why don't you tie it first and put it in there so that way you know how much that's going to displace?
Well, see, that's just being smart. I'm tying it off. I'm not putting anything else foreign into the brew. And this bag just ties nicely and holds it. And I'm going to poke it down under so that that goes underneath it, so nothing's sticking out. That's important. You don't want anything poking out of the liquid. Thankfully, these fruits, because I soaked them, are heavier than the liquid, so they don't float anymore. A couple of air bubbles in there, though.
Yeah, this is a really fine mesh bag, so it can trap little bits of air. That will release after time, and it's no big.
I'm just going to put a little bit more water in. There we go. That's as greedy as I care to be. Now, I know when we go to pull this out, I can just squeeze that bag, get a lot of the brew back out, and put it right back into here. But we'll have a whole lot less of that nasty stuff in the bottom of this. But right now, I want to take a gravity reading. I don't think it's going to be accurate, but I'm curious how much leached out, how much we got. Because I know we should have at least like a 0.047, 1.047, but it's probably going to be much higher than that because sugar's on the figs, sugar's all on the raisins, and, some of them already came out. So I'm going to use the Todd. That's right. If you're wondering, you didn't see that. If you're wondering why it's called the Todd, it's because I asked in the comments one time what we should name it. Somebody said you should call it Todd. And if you look up the Todd in St. Petersburg, Florida, it has a whole different meaning. So I just thought that was really funny.
It's actually in Tampa.
Oh, it's in Tampa. Okay.
But I wouldn't know that.
Well, it's not like we didn't drive. It's not like we didn't drive by it all the time.
I'm releasing.
You're releasing. Okay, so I said this should be about 1.047 with just the stuff that's in there, and it is 1.050. So a little bit of the sugars from the figs and raisins, it has leached into the liquid. Not too much. I probably might have a little bit more than a gallon of liquid here too. So that's going to factor in as well. Basically, I'm looking for, 10 to 12% of our liquid being alcohol in the end. What's next? Yeast. Without the yeast, this ain't going to work.
So, because we know that gravity reading was an approximation, we're not really going to write it down. We're not going to worry about it.
Sure I am. I'm writing it down.
Okay.
But I ain't going to get crazy about it. I'm going to do the little approximation thing in front of it.
There you go. That works.
But it should be 1.095 at the end. And due to some things that we've learned recently, I'm using a full packet of the yeast. Here's my theory on this. A half packet is perfectly fine. If you want to be a little more cautious and, not use the whole packet, you don't have to. But in my opinion, putting the whole packet in, not all of the yeast in here are alive. So there is some yeast hulls already in here, which is nutrient for your yeast. It provides a food source and a nutrient source for them. But there's so much stuff in here. I mean, half of this is fruit, okay? There's got to be some amount of nutrients in there too. At this point, though, if you choose, you can certainly add the nutrient of your choice. It's your mead. Do it how you like. I'm going to just put in a whole packet of yeast. Got to give it a good thwack. Hey, it's important. There's like a billion little yeast cells still stuck in here. Now I'm just going to mix that up a little bit. It's not really absolutely necessary, and it usually makes more of a mess than you need to, but I'm going to do it anyway. And now I'm going to clean it off the sides, because the yeast just love to stick to the sides of the jar. Mix that around. I'm probably going to end up having to push my bag down again. All right, so I have mixed it in, and I packed that bag down in really good so that it's not going to be poking up out of the liquid.
You also used the spoon itself to mush the bag against the side to compress any of the air bubbles out. It worked out much easier that way.
So now I'm going to put the lid on. If you use one of these little big mouth bubblers, you will be screwing on this lid for longer than you think you probably should. And then even once you get it screwed on, you really want to crank it down good. There's a very thin little liner inside this lid, and people have said that they have leakage issues. Like the seal isn't very good. I have found that when I crank it down real good like this, I don't have those issues.
Because you want to compress that foam layer at the top, and that will create the seal.
Exactly. And now we just need an airlock.
Also, if you're using one of these fermenters, make sure to check your packaging because it comes with all these things. So it has its own bung that's perfectly sized for this top.
They also have a black lid that does an open type airlock. I don't really like that. I don't think it works very well. The bung that it comes with is perfect, fits a regular airlock, and it actually works better than most bottles because it fits perfectly. It won't fall in ever.
And it's plastic against rubber, so it holds better.
See that? You said exactly what I was just thinking. Okay, so this is warm, all right? But it's fine. It's about 100 degrees. It was probably like 102 or 103 that's Fahrenheit, by the way. Celsius will be in here when I pitched the yeast. So I'm thinking this is probably going to start up fairly quickly. There's a lot of good stuff in here. The yeast are going to love this. But we'll be back in a little while to show you how this looks after a few hours or a day or two, depending on how long it takes. So we're like an hour in. Not even exactly an hour, just a little short of an hour. And it's already starting to bubble. Here it comes, slowly.
It actually started bubbling quite a while ago, but it was doing the slow bubble. Now it's doing like cluster bubbles because
Of course, now it won't bubble.
We'll give you a close-up look on it soon. Brian's just waiting for this bubble.
Oh, come on. There it is. You can sit there and watch it, and it'll bubble, 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 bubble. And then as soon as you like need it to, nope. Now it's gonna hold off because watch, it'll just bubble 3 times while I'm talking. Anyway, let's show you the inside.
So here's the airlock. It's bubbling nicely now that it's ready for its close-up, apparently.
Almost. There we go. It was doing the multiple bubbles like she said.
When you move down here to just below the lid, you can see there's a really nice layer of foam already collecting there. And that's because these yeasties here are making gas, and it's floating up to the top and creating a foam layer, and then those are breaking and pushing the gas forward into the airlock. If you go further down into the depths here, you see that the bag is actually collecting little pockets of yeast and air bubbles because the yeasts are just really going to town in there and having a good time. So good for them. And good for us because that means it's working, it's fermenting, and we will have alcohol soon.
Well, we already technically do have alcohol. Very, very, very small amount. But this is going to go into our fermentation station, which a lot of people ask about this too. They say, well, you used to put it under your desk. And I did. I don't do that anymore. Now we actually have a shelf that is actually just a shelving unit from Lowe's that's, I think, about 2 feet wide and maybe like 6 feet long or 5 feet long. And it's about yay high, just high enough that the airlocks fit underneath it. And it's just a standard shelf, but I put cardboard all around it so it blocks it in, keep the cat hair out mostly, and keep the cats out because they would climb all over it. And that way we just put everything in there. You can at a glance see what's working, see bubbles going. The sound out of there is actually quite lovely if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But people talk about smell very often. We've had a couple of people that said that they've had really horrible smelling brews and that they're afraid to keep their brews like in a room because their significant other was bothered by the smell. We do not have that problem.
Had that experience, and we keep our house pretty warm.
Yeah.
So
the only thing I can figure is they're generating a lot of sulfur dioxide, which usually happens when you don't oxygenate enough in the beginning. So in the very beginning, make sure you oxygenate properly. Other times, I'm not really sure what it could be. I think a really stressed yeast will also cause some off flavors and smells, but that means like you started with way too high of a gravity. We found 1.100 or below is pretty much the sweet spot for most yeast, the way we like to brew. Keeps the ABV in the 10 to 12% range. And like I always say, if you want more alcohol, have 2 glasses instead of just 1. But anyway, if you like this video, thanks so much for watching, and look up. There's another one up there. You might like that one too.